The night settled in quietly, wrapping the house in a calm that felt ordinary enough to ignore. It was the kind of evening where nothing stood out, where every sound and movement blended into a familiar rhythm that made you feel safe without ever questioning why. My dad and I were in his room, sitting close enough to speak without raising our voices, talking about things that didn't really matter. The conversation drifted aimlessly, one thought leading to another, never lingering long enough to become important. It was comfortable, predictable, the kind of moment you don't realize you'll remember until much later. The room itself carried a soft dimness, lit by a lamp that cast a warm glow across the bed and the nearby walls. Shadows stretched into the corners, not deep enough to be unsettling, just enough to give the space a quiet, subdued feeling. There was a stillness in the air, broken only by the low murmur of our voices and the faint, almost unnoticeable sounds of the house settling around us. Everything felt grounded, real, exactly as it should be. Behind us, the closet door was open, revealing a narrow strip of darkness that merged with the rest of the room. It wasn't fully lit, but there was enough light spilling in to make out shapes and movement. My mom was there, or at least that's what it seemed. She stood inside the closet, partially turned away, her figure calm and steady as she folded clothes one piece at a time. Her movements were slow and practiced, the kind that come from doing the same task over and over again without needing to think about it. There was nothing unusual about seeing her like that. It was something she did often, something so routine that it barely caught my attention. I didn't question it, didn't look twice, didn't feel the need to focus on it. She was simply there, existing in the background of the moment, just another part of the scene that made everything feel normal. Even the smallest details lined up perfectly, the way she stood, the slight tilt of her head, the familiar shape of her hair tied into a bun. It all matched what I knew, what I expected. My dad continued talking, occasionally shifting his posture or gesturing as he spoke, unaware of anything out of place. I listened, nodding at times, my attention drifting between his words and the quiet presence behind us. The closet remained open, unchanged, its stillness blending seamlessly into the room. There was no sudden movement, no strange noise, nothing that demanded attention or raised suspicion. And yet, hidden within that ordinary moment, there was something subtle beginning to feel off, not enough to notice immediately, not enough to interrupt the flow of conversation, but just enough to exist beneath the surface. It wasn't visible, not something you could point to or explain, but more like a faint pressure in the air, a quiet sense that something didn't fully belong, even though everything appeared exactly as it should. At first, it didn't seem like anything worth paying attention to. My dad's voice carried the same casual tone it always did when he spoke to my mom from across the room, not bothering to turn fully toward her. He asked a simple question, something ordinary and forgettable, the kind of thing that would usually be answered without hesitation. His words drifted into the space behind us, directed toward the open closet where she stood, her hands still moving with quiet consistency. There was no response. The silence that followed wasn't immediate or sharp. It eased in slowly, almost blending with the natural pauses of conversation. For a moment, it felt normal. People don't always answer right away. Maybe she didn't hear him. Maybe she was distracted. The soft, repetitive motion of her folding clothes continued, steady and unbroken, as if his voice had never reached her at all. My dad waited a second, then asked again. This time, his tone was slightly louder, just enough to carry a hint of expectation. It wasn't irritation yet, just the assumption that she must have missed the first question. His eyes flicked briefly toward the closet, though he didn't fully turn his head. He expected an answer now, something simple to confirm she was listening. But again, nothing came. The quiet in the room began to stretch in a way that felt different from before. It lingered a little too long, pressing gently against the edges of the moment. The sound of fabric shifting in the closet remained unchanged, calm and methodical, almost detached from the situation unfolding just a few feet away. It was as if her actions existed in a separate layer, one that didn't quite connect to us. My dad shifted slightly, a small sign of growing impatience. He turned his head more fully this time, his attention now fixed on the figure in the closet. There was a pause, a brief moment where he seemed to expect her to finally acknowledge him without needing to ask again. When she didn't, something in his expression tightened. "Hey," he called out once more, louder now, his voice cutting more clearly through the room. There was a sharper edge to it, the kind that comes when confusion begins to turn into annoyance. "Did you hear me?" Still no response. The question hung in the air, unanswered, while the quiet rustling of clothes continued as if nothing had changed. The contrast between his voice and her silence began to feel wrong, like two things that should have connected but didn't. I found myself looking toward the closet more often now, my attention no longer drifting. Something about the lack of acknowledgement didn't sit right, even if I couldn't explain why. My dad let out a small breath, the kind that signals rising frustration. His posture shifted again, more rigid this time, and when he spoke next, there was no mistaking the change in his tone. It wasn't just a question anymore, it was a demand to be heard. "Why are you ignoring me?" His voice was louder than before, echoing slightly against the walls, filling the room in a way that made everything else feel smaller. The stillness that followed felt heavier, more deliberate, as if the silence itself had become part of the tension. And through it all, she kept moving, her hands folding clothes with the same slow precision, never pausing, never turning, never reacting. By that point, the silence had stretched too far to ignore, and something inside me pushed me to move. It wasn't courage, not really, more like a need to break whatever strange tension had settled into the room. My dad's voice had grown sharper, heavier, and yet it seemed to bounce off the figure in the closet without leaving a mark. She hadn't reacted once, not even a slight pause in her movements, and that was what made it feel wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I stood up slowly, almost without realizing I had made the decision to do it. The shift from sitting to standing felt louder than it should have, like I was disturbing something delicate in the air. My eyes were fixed on the closet now, no longer just a part of the background but the center of everything. From where I stood, I could still see her shape, familiar, steady, continuing that same repetitive motion of folding clothes as if nothing else existed. Each step I took toward the closet felt heavier than the last. The soft carpet beneath my feet muted the sound, but I could still feel the movement in my body, the slight tightening in my chest, the quiet awareness that something wasn't lining up the way it should. My dad didn't stop me, didn't say anything. Maybe he expected me to get her attention, or maybe he just didn't understand why she hadn't responded either. As I got closer, the details seemed to blur instead of sharpen. That should have been the first real warning. Normally, when you approach something, it becomes clearer, more defined. But here, it felt different, like the closer I moved, the less certain everything became. Her outline was still there, her posture unchanged, but there was something off in the way it all held together, like a picture that looked fine from a distance but lost its meaning up close. I reached the edge of the closet and hesitated for just a fraction of a second. The air felt cooler there, or maybe it was just my imagination reacting to the moment. The light from the room barely touched the inside, leaving most of it in a dim, shadowed haze. Still, I was close enough now that there should have been no doubt about what I was seeing. I took one final step inside. And everything stopped. The movement, the presence, the figure that had been there just seconds before, it was gone. Not fading, not shifting, not stepping away. Gone in a way that made no sense at all. The space in front of me was empty, filled only with hanging clothes and a faint stillness that felt deeper than it should have. A few garments swayed slightly, as if they had just been disturbed, but there was no one there to have caused it. I froze, my mind struggling to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. I knew what had been there. I had watched it, clear as anything, the steady folding, the familiar shape. There was no way it could have disappeared so completely in the time it took me to step forward. My heart began to pound, each beat louder than the last, filling the silence that now felt overwhelming. I looked around the small space, expecting to find some explanation. Maybe she had moved, maybe she had stepped out without me noticing, but there was nowhere to go, no place to hide. The closet was too small, too contained for anything like that. And yet, it was empty. The emptiness in the closet hadn't even had time to settle in my mind when something else broke through it, soft, unmistakable footsteps approaching from behind. They were clear in a way that cut through the silence, grounded and real, each step measured and natural against the floor. The sound didn't belong to whatever had just vanished. It belonged to someone living, someone present, someone entirely separate from the impossible absence I was staring into. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body felt caught between two realities, the one I had just witnessed and the one now announcing itself from behind me. The closet in front of me remained still, lifeless, offering no explanation, no trace of what had been there only seconds ago. And yet the footsteps grew closer, steady and unhurried, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. I turned slowly. The doorway framed her perfectly. My mom stood there, her figure outlined by the dim light of the room, her presence immediate and undeniable. Her hair was damp, darker than before, strands clinging slightly to her forehead and neck. A towel was wrapped securely around her body, the fabric stark and bright against the muted tones of the room. There was nothing strange about her appearance, nothing unnatural, nothing out of place. She looked exactly as she should have, as if she had just stepped out from somewhere else entirely. Her expression was calm, but touched with confusion. Her eyes moved between me and my dad, trying to make sense of the tension that had clearly built in the room without her. "Why are you yelling my name?" she asked. Her voice was normal. That was the part that struck the hardest. It carried the same tone, the same rhythm, the same familiarity I had known my entire life. There was no hesitation in it, no awareness of anything unusual. It was the voice of someone who had just walked into a situation she didn't understand, not someone who had been standing in the closet moments before, ignoring repeated calls. My mind struggled to connect the two images, the figure I had just seen folding clothes, and the woman now standing in front of me. They were identical in shape, in presence, in every detail that mattered. And yet, they could not be the same. The evidence was right in front of me, undeniable and immediate. She had come from somewhere else. She had just arrived. Behind me, the closet remained open, silent, empty. I glanced back without thinking, my eyes searching for any sign that I had been wrong, that something had shifted or reappeared in the seconds I had turned away. But there was nothing there. Only the same stillness, the same unmoving clothes, the same hollow space where something had existed just moments ago. When I looked back at her again, she hadn't moved much. She was still standing in the doorway, still holding that same puzzled expression, waiting for an answer that neither of us could give. My dad hadn't spoken yet, and I could feel the weight of his silence behind me, heavy and uncertain. The room felt different now, no longer quiet in a comforting way, but in a way that pressed in from all sides. Two moments overlapped in my mind, the one where she had been there, and the one where she clearly wasn't, and neither one could erase the other. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. The question my mom had asked lingered in the air, unanswered, as if even words were struggling to find a place in what had just happened. I stood there between the open closet and the doorway, caught in a space that no longer felt stable or certain. My eyes moved from her to the emptiness behind me, then back again, as if repeating the motion might somehow make the two images align into something that made sense. But they didn't. My dad was the first to react, though even his reaction wasn't immediate. I could feel it before I heard it, the shift in his posture, the quiet tension settling into the room from where he stood. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. It had lost its earlier frustration, replaced by something quieter, something edged with disbelief. "You were just in there," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even fully directed at her. It was more like he was saying it out loud to convince himself it had happened. My mom frowned slightly, her confusion deepening. "What are you talking about?" she replied. Her tone was steady, but there was a hint of unease creeping in now, as if she could sense that something was wrong even if she didn't understand what. I turned to look at my dad fully for the first time since stepping into the closet. His eyes weren't on my mom, they were fixed on me. And in that moment, I saw it clearly, he had seen it too. There was no doubt, no hesitation in his expression. Whatever I had witnessed in the closet, whatever had been standing there, moving, existing in a way that felt completely real, it hadn't been my imagination. He had watched it just as I had. He had called out to it, expected it to answer, grown frustrated when it didn't. The realization passed between us without needing words, heavy and undeniable. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry, and glanced back toward the closet again. It remained unchanged, empty in a way that felt wrong, as if it had been stripped of something it wasn't meant to lose. The space seemed smaller now, more confined, like it was holding onto a secret it refused to give back. "But, you were there," I managed to say, my voice quieter than I expected. I wasn't even sure who I was speaking to anymore, my mom, my dad, or myself. She shook her head slowly, taking a small step forward into the room. "I was in the bathroom," she said. "I just got out." Her words landed heavily, sealing the gap between what we had seen and what was real. There was no overlap, no possibility that we had simply misunderstood. The timing didn't allow for it. The distance didn't allow for it. The certainty in both her voice and my dad's silence made it impossible to explain away. A cold feeling settled into my chest, spreading slowly as the truth took hold. Whatever had been in that closet had looked exactly like her, her shape, her posture, even the small, familiar detail of her hair tied up the way she always wore it. It hadn't been a shadow or a trick of the light. It had been something precise, something intentional. And the worst part wasn't just that I had seen it. It was that my dad had seen it too.